All right, which is better, a Roth IRA or a 401k? Now, before we answer that question, we need to highlight a couple things. First, we're going to assume that the way it was issued, the person who wrote it was asking the difference between a Roth IRA, which is distinct enough, and a traditional 401k, even though a Roth 401k is also an option. So first off, let's just talk a little bit quickly about the differences between a Roth and a Roth IRA and a Roth or a traditional 401k. So a Roth, the contributions that go in are not tax deductible like they would be in a traditional IRA. But the growth in earnings grow completely tax-free, and at age 59 and a half, you can begin making withdrawals from that account, and there's no tax liability on it at all. All the taxes are on the front end. A traditional 401k, on the other hand, you get a tax deduction as you put money into the account. In other words, you pay no tax on the contributions. But down the road, when you make withdrawals, it's completely taxed as income. So every penny that comes out is taxed then. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how they work. Let's talk about how Roth IRAs and 401ks are similar first. To begin with, they're available in both a Roth or traditional option. They both are eligible for withdrawals without penalty beginning at age 59 and a half, though there is a caveat. The rule of 55 applies to 401ks. It's not available to Roth IRAs or traditional IRAs either. That's a whole different post, but if you're interested in hitting your 401k a little earlier, look up the rule of 55. That's something you can look at. Also, the rollover and conversion treatment is pretty similar for Roth IRAs and 401ks. And I wanted to hit the highlights of how they're similar because you need to remember they're more similar than different. They're basically IRS incentivized retirement plans. And though they do have some differences, which we'll talk about in a second, as we kind of go through this, you need to see them as both good options, even though one may be a little more optimal than the other. So don't overthink it. They're both great, but let's talk a little bit more about the differences. Okay, the key difference between an IRA and 401k is the possibility of employer match. Now, I know simple IRAs allow for employer match, but not a lot of people have those. It's a smaller match. We're not going to cover that in this talk. Anyway, the key distinct difference, though, is 401ks allow for employer match, which is a huge difference. And we're going to talk, again, more about that in a second. Another difference is Roth IRAs have lower income restrictions. In other words, if your modified adjusted gross income is too high, you can disqualify yourself from that or range out of it or phase out of it, if you will, a little quicker than you can. A 401k doesn't really have an income restriction for a safe harbor 401k plan. For 401k plans that don't qualify as safe harbor, there are exceptions. You may test out of those possibly. Another big difference is the amount you can put into a 401k is much larger than a Roth IRA. In 2023, a Roth IRA allows for a $6,500 contribution for those that are under 50. There's another $1,000 catch up if you're over 50. 401ks allow for $22,500 in a tax advantage space or contribution, and then up to $30,000 if you're over 50. But then you can go all the way up to, I think, $66,000 of after-tax contributions to a 401k. That's if you're under 50, and then I think it's $72,500 or something like that if you're over 50. So the amount you can contribute to a 401k is magnitudes larger than an IRA. Roth IRAs also allow for withdrawal of contributions, but that's also true for a Roth 401k. You can't do that with the traditional because that hasn't been taxed, and the government wants you to leave that money in the account as long as possible. Roth does allow for contributions to be removed, which is kind of a nice feature. If you have an emergency, something comes up and you just can't get money somewhere else, you could possibly tap the Roth, though it's not recommended. And the final difference is 401ks typically have more limited options when it comes to investments. The portfolio that you can choose from is usually limited by the concessioner of the 401k plan. Usually your employer will hire somebody, an investment company, to manage it. And they're going to offer typically a pretty limited selection of funds. Now, if you have a big plan or you work for a big company and they have somebody that's focused that can help you get access to more things, there are some plans that allow for a connection to the broader range of marketable securities that are available for purchase. But if you're in an IRA, you get to choose your custodian, and you're basically unlimited to what you can buy. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. Hey, if you haven't done so already, please click the like and subscribe buttons below. That really helps our channel grow, helps people see what we're doing and learn more about finance. All right, now before we move on, let's unpack two key components to Roth IRAs and traditional 401ks. The first is there's a different tax treatment. So that piece is the Roth versus traditional. And then there's a different account type. That's the IRA versus 401k. And really when you're evaluating which one's better or which one you should use, you sort of need to pull those pieces out, because the Roth and traditional option is available in an IRA or 401k. And if you have access to a 401k, you definitely also have access to an IRA. You can contribute to both. You may not have a 401k where you work, but most people do. And since that's what we're talking about, that's what we're going to cover. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that they're different. So let's cover the tax treatment piece first. Roth IRAs we already talked about. You pay income tax on the contribution, but you don't pay anything when you pull it out. A traditional 401k or traditional IRA, you get an income tax deduction on any contribution, but you have to pay income tax on every bit that you withdraw. Now, that creates a tax arbitrage opportunity, because let's say, just for example, I'll use myself. When I was in my mid-20s, I wasn't making a huge income. I contributed to Roth IRAs because my income was low. I'd rather pay income tax at that point when my income was low than when I retire, or maybe later in life when I think my income will be higher, at least I hope it will. That means I pay the income tax, get it out of the way when my rate's low, and then pay high. So example, I don't know, it's probably in like a 12 or 15% bracket in my mid-20s. If my income is, like, we're married, filing jointly, we're in the 22% bracket now. So let's just say that stayed as it is, and I was in the 22% bracket when I make withdrawals. That means I saved 7 to 10% on each dollar that I invested in tax savings. And the reverse is true if your income is high. So if you're mid-career and your life is great, income's good, and you're making a lot of money, you might want to go ahead and take that tax with deduction now, and that way you basically save the income you've got now from taxes. Then when you make a withdrawal, maybe it'll be at a lower tax rate, and you can take advantage of that then when you make your withdrawal. Next, you want to consider your state income tax rate. So if you live in a state where there is no income tax, then it may be wise to do the Roth, because you're not paying any income tax on that contribution, even though technically it's not tax deferred or tax deductible. On the other hand, if you have a traditional contribution and you're in an income tax-free state, you don't get a deduction for that either. And you may move, who knows? That's something to consider. Another is Roth dollars are more valuable the younger you are. You have a longer timeline for the earnings and growth to build tax-free. If you're closer to retirement, that's not quite as valuable, so it's something to keep in mind as well. And another option is you can always hedge your bets and do both. That's what we do now. About half of our portfolio is in Roth from when we were younger and contribute a lot to that. Now we do a little more on the traditional side, but we still do some Roth because we don't really know what taxes will be like down the road anyway. So you can always do a balance to kind of give yourself the best of both worlds. All right, next we want to talk about the account types. So 401k versus Roth. We talked a little bit earlier about IRAs and how first investment options are more abundant in IRAs. That's one thing to keep in mind that makes an IRA potentially more attractive than a 401k. Typically that also means you'll have access to lower cost funds, lower cost investments than you would in a 401k, because in a 401k you're usually pretty captive to whatever your company offers. And then even if you can get into the broader market, there's usually a lot of fees associated with accessing mutual funds and different types of equities outside of your plan's portfolio. But the biggest thing to consider when you're evaluating a 401k versus an IRA is the employer match. By far and away, the employer match makes the 401k the account type that is far more valuable. So if you have an a Roth versus traditional option in your 401k, which you probably do if you have a 401k, then you have the tax piece already in place. What you can't get is an employer match in an IRA. So again, against simple IRAs excluded, you can't get an employer match in an IRA. So an employer match is free money. It's your employer literally saying, if you will save in this account, we will make a contribution on your behalf. It's like on your behalf. It's like a gift. They're just giving it to you. You can't ignore that. So that if you have an employer match, even if it's profit sharing and it's undefined, it's still free. 10% If it's not 100% matched, 10% is still better than zero, right? And you're not getting anything in the IRA. So that's the biggest, to me, distinction between a 401k and an IRA that makes a 401k potentially more valuable. Let's say you make $100,000 a year and you want to save 20% somewhere for retirement. So the plan we would follow is we would say first, if you have an employer-sponsored or 401k plan that has a match, take advantage of all the match you can get. So let's say they say they'll match up to 5% of your income. Take that first 5%, that first $5,000, because you have a $100,000 income, and put it in the 401k and get the match. Now, you can make the Roth versus traditional decision differently. We'll talk more about that in a second. But account type wise, you want to go ahead and get the match. So you got $15,000 left to save, right? The next chunk, you should max out your Roth IRA. That's what I would do, because after you've got the match, the 401k and the IRA are pretty similar, but remember the investment options, the expense ratios, the costs that are lower in the IRA kind of gives it a little bit of a more higher value. So the next dollars would go into that. Like we said, $6,500 in the year 2023 could go to that. That would make a total contribution so far of $11,500, leaving you $8,500 to invest somewhere else. I'd go back to the 401k and finish off there. That's where I put the rest of the savings for retirement. That way you've maximized the opportunity you have to get the employer match, to take advantage of the low-cost funds and investments that are available in an IRA, and you've got that broader spectrum of investments so that you can make adjustments down the road if you want to. Then you go back to the 401k and finish it off. You got your 20% in, you've optimized it. That's the path that we would follow. So we went through that pretty quickly. There's actually a lot more information that goes into the Roth versus traditional piece. For the sake of the video being somewhat reasonably short, we left a lot of that out, but we're making a video that's going to dive into that really deeply. If you want to look into that more, we got a link below to a post we've done about the Roth versus traditional decision. It's pretty long, got a lot of details in there, so if you want to nerd out, check that out. That's on our website at martinmoney.com. We also have the Next Dollar Roadmap, which is our 10-step plan, if you will, from zero to negative net worth or debt, all the way to paying that off, building emergency savings, investing, growing, paying, for retirement, paying off your house, all the way to financial independence. It covers the whole gambit, and it kind of provides a pathway to optimize all the decisions along the way. We'll link that in the description below as well. We appreciate it again. Thanks for watching the video. Y'all have a great day.